Hello, everyone. My name is Isaac Sokolik. I lead a company called Star CIO, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We're going to be speaking about the Atlassian Cloud migration, minimizing the costs, reducing the headaches, and accelerating the benefits. And this webinar is brought to you by ISOS Technology and Atlassian. So thank you for joining us today. A couple things about our webinar today. We are recording. So if you have to cut out for any reason, or more importantly, if you need to show this webinar to your colleagues, just know that we are going to record it. It's going to be shared, so you'll get access to it after the webinar is completed. Second is, please ask your questions. We know some of you may be in the midst of a migration or thinking about a migration, or as you will see, required to do a migration at some point. And so there's a lot of technical details around this. We're going to be sharing a ton of it during this webinar today, and I hope you will be looking to ask questions. So to joining me today, I want to invite our panelists. First up is Anderson Garcia. He's a senior solutions engineer over at Atlassian. And then also Nick Nader. He's a solutions engineer over at ISOS Technology. Hello, Anderson and Nick. Thank you for joining. As you know, I'm always looking for easy buttons when I do migrations and acceleration and look for accelerating the benefits. So much of IT runs on Atlassian's products. It's the backbone of many IT shops, ones that I work with included. And so when we talk about migration, we're talking about how do we do this well? How do we reduce interruptions? How do we minimize costs in the upgrades? And really, what are the benefits that we're getting and how do we accelerate that? So that's going to be our conversation today. And I want to make sure everybody knows about the announcement from Atlassian around Jira Service products. Let's make sure people understand the details around that. So Anderson, you work over at Atlassian. Tell us a little bit about what the server products end of life is all about.
Sure, yeah, happy to be here. Glad to have everybody here join us today. So the end of life for server was announced around this time last year, that we were deprecating or end of lifing support for all of our server products in 2024. So giving customers about a 3-year time span to determine what their next steps are in regards to their on-prem hosted server applications. These extend out to Jira Software, Jira Service Management, Jira Core, Confluence, Bitbucket, Crowd, Bamboo, and any Atlassian-built server apps, with the exception of Fisheye and Crucible, which will remain on server in maintenance mode. A few key dates. I know the timeline is put up there for everybody to review, but just a few key dates to keep in mind is here in about a week, we will conclude the end of user tiers upgrades and downgrades. So you'll be locked in on your existing user tier for your server. We will also, in about a year, end the sale of new marketplace apps on server. And then in about 2 years, on February 2nd, 2024, we will officially end support for server products, meaning we will no longer put any more releases into those server products, and our support team will no longer help with any support cases raised from server products. Options for our customers include the ability to move into the Atlassian Cloud, our SaaS hosting, or pursue a data center license to replace your server license. You can find more detailed information at atlassian.com/migration, kind of a one place to go and check out everything, all these timelines that were shown and all of your options, and perhaps assess your migration to either option, whether that be cloud or data center.
Thanks, Anderson. And you know, as a former CIO, when I hear a product is going end of life and I'm being asked to do a migration, it's always something that, you know, I have to figure it out. It's something that I want to do. But give me a sense, why is Atlassian doing this? What is it? What's the benefit for customers, and how does it pave a path forward?
Yeah, great question. Well, it's been no secret that we've been on a journey to becoming a cloud-first company. And we're shifting investments to areas that we believe will benefit our customers in the long term. Things like streamlined administration, instant scalability, and an emphasis on quicker time to value to create a richer customer experience. Before we even announced the end of life for server, I saw the overwhelming majority of our new customers were already opting for the cloud experience. Like many of our customers, I cut my teeth on server, but have since then come to recognize and really embrace the value of our cloud platform. Not only does it unify the user experience across all of our product suite, but it really helps teams collaborate more effectively. I really enjoy the way the automation engine complemented with the machine learning capability of cloud has helped reduce time spent on repetitive tasks and really drives efficiency for all of our customers across the board.
That's great, Anderson. Thank you for that. And today we're going to, in this webinar, we're going to go through accelerating the benefits, reducing the costs, reducing the headaches. I really want to start with the benefits, right? This is going to be, it's 2022. The end of life is 2024. That means somewhere either this year or next year, I'm going to have to do an upgrade. And there are a lot of benefits of running in the cloud. Nick, you have a number of customers that you've helped migrate, that you helped support in the cloud, working at ISOS technology. Tell us a little bit about that experience. What are customers gaining when they move to the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely, Isaac. A few main areas that I wanted to focus on here. First off is infrastructure management, which is obviously being handled by the customer when they're on-prem, when they're on that data center or server environment. And that's obviously being handled by Atlassian for their cloud products, which is an immediate cost savings that people get out of software as a service products like Atlassian's Cloud. Secondly, opportunity cost. A lot of our customers find that it's a great opportunity to consolidate their licenses for their main products, consolidate main product instances, as well as third-party licenses, while they're moving to the cloud. And a lot of the native cloud functionality that is packaged in with those cloud licenses replaces a lot of the third-party app functionality that they needed those apps for on server. And then finally, cloud administration, much more centralized with the use of Atlassian Access and usability across the products, and that collaborative functionality that Anderson was alluding to is much more seamless with UI updates like cross-product search bars, meaning within Jira, Confluence, or Bitbucket, you can search across all of those products from any of them, as well as like consolidated notifications from any of those products, in any of those products.
Thanks, Anderson. I'm sorry, thanks, Dick. Anderson, tell me more about this.
Yeah, I think just building on what Nick already mentioned, I think some of the tangible benefits are really going to vary based on a customer's use case. But generally, things like security improvements, where patches for vulnerabilities are now automatically released into our CI/CD pipeline for deployment with no disruption to the customer, is kind of a major highlight that nobody can overlook. You no longer have to manually patch your applications if you're in cloud, that you're getting the benefit of that already. The responsibility, as Nick mentioned, the responsibility of upgrading the application is now also done automatically, so customers don't suffer any downtime and end users get their hands on the latest and greatest feature sets. So not only is cloud driving efficiencies due to alleviated administration, but also through innovation, which promotes new ways of working. We can, in real time, rate user adoption and satisfaction on feature releases, making our iterations all the more meaningful to our customers.
Thanks, Anderson. I recently did a blog post on the ISOS website about some of these benefits, and I quoted some metrics from a Forrester study on the total economic benefit of running on the Atlassian Cloud. You'll get a URL to that at the end of this webinar, but two things really stuck out. 90% of tickets are reduced when companies move from the server products to on cloud. And you could see that because there's just less infrastructure administration, there's less infrastructure response to issues. So you not only see a reduction in the number of tickets, but the ones that remain, the amount of time it takes to resolve those tickets drops by 38%. So I'm saying fewer tickets by significant amount, and the ones that are remaining are a lot easier. So when Nick talked about infrastructure management, we're not just talking about SANs and networks, we're talking about really IT operations time to administer these systems. And the second thing is when we talk about upgrades, the reason many customers of Atlassian fall behind in upgrading their Atlassian product is Atlassian does a great job doing upgrades. They do them 6 to 7 times a year for Jira software, another 6 or 7 times for Jira Service Manager. It means you're probably doing an upgrade at least once every 2 months. We know IT is really busy doing upgrades and managing other systems. And so who's hurt by this? It's the end users who are not seeing the latest and greatest features and capabilities. They're really about collaborating and working together in this hybrid environment. So Anderson, maybe let's talk about this, accelerating the benefits. Let's look at it from an end user's perspective. What are some of the things that end users are seeing and feeling when they're running in the cloud and using all the capabilities in the latest versions?
Yeah, not only end users, but also administrators. There's a lot of great benefits even for the administrator in cloud. A few trends that the enjoyable trends that I've seen among our server to cloud customers, those who have migrated from server, include better in-cloud features like Atlassian Access, which is a completely new model for managing users. It's our product that allows customers to centralize the governance of users, security, and even the IT sprawl against all cloud side subscriptions. So this new model of a centralized approach unlocks the ability to federate cloud instances across the Atlassian hosted infrastructure while still maintaining a centralized governance. So you can now scale vertically with unlimited storage in our cloud, or horizontally with multiple sites to support all of your team's use cases. Another big hit that I've noticed from cloud customers is advanced road mapping in Jira software. So it's now you can plan and track work across multiple teams and projects, giving your business the ability to account for team capacity or quickly surface dependencies across different programs or initiatives. And then, of course, last but not least, I would say Jira Service Management is our fastest growing cloud subscription to date. Its innovative approach to IT service management has earned it the visionary rating in the 2021 Gartner Magic Quadrant for IT service management. So those are just a few things that I've seen customers that have recently adopted cloud really hold on to and really enjoy.
There's some great examples in there, Anderson. I think about, some companies that have really disparate projects between businesses that are highly regulated, businesses that are less regulated. They're doing acquisitions, and now you have this new environment in the cloud where they can absorb projects, run them differently. I think about the automations. Every one of the customers I work with uses automation significantly to reduce some of the administrative work, some of the ease of use factors, some really good things that come out of just being able to be on the latest version. Nick, what are you seeing? You've done some migrations of some very big customers. If I go talk to their leadership, what are some of the benefits that they're seeing now that they're running in the cloud?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Isaac. I really want to invoke a recent migration success story that we had here at ISOS. It was one of ours, and I believe Atlassian's biggest migrations to date as well, with the client having about 4,000 users, but a much larger project and volume data than the average customer. And they had issues with hosting infrastructure on-prem while on data center. And they also saw the cloud migration, like I mentioned before, as a great opportunity to consolidate and restructure their environment while also alleviating those infrastructure pains. And they actually ended up taking advantage of the Cloud Enterprise license tier. And if you guys aren't aware, as Anderson mentioned, that allows you to have as many federated instances in the cloud as you would like. And that allowed them to split their Jira environments between their engineering teams and their business teams. And this actually allowed them to save on third-party app licensing costs, because those engineering teams needed a few dozen apps from the marketplace for their functionality, whereas the business teams did not need those apps. And so they were able to purchase those app licenses for just the engineering teams rather than all 4,000 users within their environments. So that's ended up saving them a lot of money in the long run. Accomplishing that federated model is possible on data center, but it's usually more difficult and more expensive. So the cloud really enabled that to happen. And then finally, the move also allowed them to kind of scale. They had a lot of customizations on their DC environment that weren't quite going to be able to scale on that environment like they would within the cloud. So it also enabled them for that scale as well.
Nick, I want to make sure I understand this, because I get confronted by this by customers that want to turn on a feature for their engineering team, and they're sitting on hundreds of licenses in their environment. So you're saying I can split my environment, I can federate it. The developers are going to be able to turn on these features for themselves, pay for the developers who are getting access to that. And then my business users, I have marketers who are using Jira for different things. They're not going to need those licenses. I'm going to federate that out, and I can just pay for what I need. Is that, do I have that right?
Precisely right. And how the marketplace works for Atlassian is you have to cover the seats that you have within Jira or Confluence for the third-party apps that you're going to install in your environment. So being able to federate and split those environments essentially gives you those two separate pools of users, and you can get the apps that only those users need rather than your entire organization.
Okay. This makes sense. All right. And, look, I think, again, that Jira and Jira Service Management are the heartbeat. They are the backbone for IT. That's where all the workflow and all the collaboration's happening. I think in a hybrid world, we want the activity to be happening in our centralized tools, outside of emails and outside of conversations, so it can keep the workflow happening efficiently. And so now I'm hooked. I want to get there faster, but I don't want to have any headaches when I'm migrating. Nobody wants to start planning that migration, get halfway through, turn it on for users, realize that they're missing data, realize that they have to back something out because they missed a step around this. So tell me about this, Anderson. Why am I doing this? How am I doing this where I'm not going to run into headaches? My admins are telling me that they want to do this themselves. Maybe they want to hire a couple developers to help them. How do I do this so that it's seamless and easy for everybody to do this upgrade and not run into issues?
Yeah, I think before you even jump into migration and moving data around, perhaps the most important step is assessing your current landscape on-prem. Surfacing the complexity within your environment is where our partners, like ISOs, are well experienced in helping customers find those gotchas early on. I often hear from our customers that over the years, they have inherited the administration of the on-prem products. So mission critical dependencies are not always obvious at the onset, and they usually require a fine-tooth comb that is best provided by an expert who's done hundreds of assessments of different environments. So they'll usually be able to surface those dependencies where a customer may not be aware are embedded within their own environment. And I think Nick alluded to this already with his customer story. There's also the opportunity to reevaluate the current environment and streamline projects and configurations. Get into some standards across the business to not only promote a shift into cloud, but also adopt a transformation along the way. And that can be best facilitated with partner guidance. So each customer's migration journey is going to be distinctly unique. And while Atlassian does provide you some tools and migration guides to get you a good start, some of those strategies are often more than not nuanced. And for example, a partner can walk you through different strategies, but they can also make tailored recommendations on what's going to be the best fit for you. Whether that's optimizing and shifting, again, back to Nick's story where he helped the customer recognize that there was a sprawl of on-prem that needed to be consolidated before they moved into a centralized destination in cloud, or phasing your approach and using a hybrid environment as you go through that transition, it's always going to be a lot easier to lean on a partner's expertise to walk you through that. There's also other strategies like lifting and shifting or starting fresh, or a combination of any of those. Using a combination or a blend of any of those is often going to be something that a partner can help you with, especially the partners who are specialized in cloud and kind of know the possibilities of what's available for your unique scenario.
Anderson, I love that because, the organizations I work with, they love using Jira, they continue to use Jira, but when they say Jira, there's probably 10 or 20 different flavors of it that they're using that's been built up over time. And now I want to migrate over, and the last thing I want to do is lift and shift all my problems and my benefits. I want to leave my problems behind. I want to get some standards in place, and I want some help. Do I do this before I migrate and then I have a nice landing zone, or do I migrate and then consolidate? Seems like there's a number of questions there. Nick, bring me into the technical weeds. I'm going to bring on ISOS to help me out with doing this. What are some of the technical things that you're going to solve for so I don't have any headaches while I'm migrating?
Yeah, that's a great question, Isaac. In the past, we've actually had a couple of customers attempt a migration on their own before, coming to ISOS after either a failed attempt or some data loss during their own personal migration, where we had to clean it up for them. And, I think this happens because, more often than not, the person that we're talking to in that pre-sales cycle, that decision maker, underestimates the complexity within their environment. And they also underestimate the work that goes into some of the migration efforts that us as partners do. And, a lot of that complexity comes from the third-party applications that we keep mentioning, since they're programmed independently, by all of their own individual vendors. They all have their own unique migration path, and those paths aren't always perfect, and they don't always port all of your data over into the cloud with all of its functionality intact. So you can think of things like Script Runner, X-Ray and Zephyr for test case management, Easy BI for business intelligence, JMWE, JSU automation for all those automative scripts. And all of these popular apps, will take some kind of custom scripting to get all of their functionality and data into the cloud and not lose any of that data or any of that functionality once you get them into the cloud. So during migrations, ISOS will do extensive rehearsal for all of these apps. We'll also more typically create custom scripts for each of the unique third-party applications as well. So a lot goes into these migration efforts than people originally and initially assume. And they think that they're just a little simpler than they actually end up being, especially with all the customizations people have on their server environments.
Thanks, Nick. I mean, there's a question around here already coming in. We have held off because not all add-on products are available in the cloud. Will all add-on products be available at some point? Anderson, I don't know if you can answer that. And for the person who asked the question, if you have specifics in mind, if you want to put that into the Q&A, we might be able to get you some answers here or have ISOS follow up with you on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it's common with, I think I saw a statistic of 80% of our customers have those app dependencies. And when you start this cloud migration phase, like I mentioned, the assessment phase is going to be one of the most important parts. Part of that assessment phase is understanding what dependency you have on that app. Is there already cloud native functionality that you can that you no longer need that app in cloud because it's already provided, so you can deprecate that? Is there is there feature parity or cloud alternative apps already exist in our marketplace that can replace that app? So it really depends on the level of assessment that you do around that app before you determine point blank, I need this app in cloud. So investing in that assessment phase is really going to help you minimize some of that app cost and also some of that debt that apps sometimes provide.
Thank you. If you want to follow up and list out some of the apps you're referring to, we can do a follow-up question. And just a reminder to everybody on the webinar, please do ask your questions. We're going to get to as many of them as we can, and be specific, right? Well, we have some experts here who can help reducing the headaches of doing a migration and even finding some of the benefits. I'll tell you, I had one customer that had some things built on-prem with some custom scripting, and we found alternative scripting libraries and use migrations to be able to migrate them into more supportable platforms. So a lot of different options around this, and I like your suggestion, Anderson, to get the assessment done. Nick, how long does an assessment take? Give me a sense of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Typically it depends on the volume and the size of the environment. They'll range from anywhere between, 4 to 8 weeks for the full assessment. And we dig into a lot of information around that assessment, right? We'll interview your teams to understand their third-party app usage, like you just alluded to. So we'll dig into exactly what apps you're using. More often than not, a lot of customers have apps installed on their environment that show up on their system information page that they're not actually utilizing and aren't business critical. So evaluating that, business criticality of each of their individual apps to determine if we actually do need to, migrate those over into the cloud, and if we do want to, spend that money to create those custom scripts and add that risk and complexity to the migration itself. But the assessment digs into a lot of other things as well, like what are some recommendations and best practices around restructuring your environment, right? Like the customer story I mentioned earlier, we made some recommendations around how they could go with the enterprise tier and federate those environments so that their engineering and business teams were split up and they could save some money on those licensing costs. And the only reason that we were enabled to do that is because we got to dig in, before going into that migration and do that assessment with their teams and really understand their needs when, moving to the cloud eventually.
Great. The person followed up with some of the plugins here. Notify Me, custom field pack for Jira Core, user property listener for Jira Core. Nick, your head is nodding. It sounds like you've seen these before.
Yeah, so there are a couple of those that we've migrated before. Their vendors specifically don't have cloud versions, but I wouldn't always say that that's a hard stop for migrating to the cloud, right? Like Anderson mentioned, there's also alternatives within the cloud environments, right? There are vendors that have been creating cloud apps that have very similar or really pretty much the same functionality as some of those on-prem exclusive apps that you mentioned, as well as some native cloud functionality that might tackle some of those notification needs as well, right? So I would definitely talk to a partner, dig into the requirements that you have around those applications, and they will definitely find, a cloud equivalent app that, has that functionality that you need.
Great. We'll definitely have somebody from ISOS follow up on those particular libraries. There's one more question here around apps that I think worth asking before we get to our next topic. How do they find out when if there isn't a cloud replacement app? Is there a way to find out what kind of manual work is going to be required after migration?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll take a stab at this one. Typically what we can do, especially during those assessments, right, is we can dig in and figure out what kind of manual work it would take to recreate some of that functionality or that data, right? So a lot of these apps that don't have cloud equivalents can be manually converted to something else. A lot of the times ISOS will create proprietary tooling for that kind of gap in the migration process, whether it's a gap in the vendor app migration path or whether it's a gap in functionality that they don't have on cloud quite yet for their cloud equivalent app. So a lot of the times we'll manually recreate some of those. What comes to mind first is workflow customization apps. A lot of those don't have a cloud equivalent, but we can manually convert over into something like automation for Jira that already exists within the products natively within the cloud. Great.
Thanks for that, Nick. Let's move on to our next topic. I want to make sure we cover minimizing costs. Right now, on-prem, I'm going to move. I now understand some of the ways to reduce headaches around the move. I also want to make sure that I accelerate the benefits, but where does cost fit into this picture? Anderson, what could you share with the group about some best practices here?
Yeah, so if you look at our migration guide that I alluded to or provided that URL earlier in the presentation, we advertise or we kind of prescribe that a typical timeline for migration can take anywhere from 3 to 12 months. But the reality of the situation and what I've seen just in observation is the typical timeline of a migration really, if you do it yourself without the assistance of a partner, extends out to closer to that 9 to 12-month mark. That timeline can be reduced with a partner's help to about 3 to 6 months. So thinking about what's your timeline as a customer, like when is your renewal date up? What are the resources that you have available in terms of staffing to help with this migration? And perhaps the perceived complexity of your environment are all factors that you're really going to want to think about, and that'll likely tip you towards the benefit of a partner. It's, as Nick mentioned, it's their experience and rehearsal that really comes to value here. So enlisting a partner usually can pay for itself when you think about that shorter time frame to production cut over to cloud. You're saving, up to 6 months or more with a partner's help. And then they help you reduce some of the risks of unforeseen delays. That usually is why you extend your timeline from 9 to 12 months if you do it yourself. So with that shorter timeline in production to cut over, because of the partner's experience, you're really going to benefit an earlier time to value in cloud.
Thanks, Anderson. So, I'm hearing I can do it faster with a partner. I'm hearing that I'm not going to have mistakes that will extend the timeline. And obviously, there's an internal cost to that when I keep my team involved for 9, 12 months instead of 6 months. I'm hearing the word rehearsal. That sounds like not just the migration steps, but also the testing steps to make sure that I'm not leaving data behind, to make sure that the experience moves over. What else am I missing, Nick? And, ISOs, tell us about yourselves. Why should I do this with you?
Thank you for teeing me up with that one, Isaac. ISO's technology, we've exclusively consulted around Atlassian Suite, and we've been doing it for over 15 years now, right? So everything we do is Atlassian. We don't have any distractions with other tools. All of our resources are specifically for Atlassian products. And we're also a platinum, top platinum solution partner of Atlassian's. And we also have their cloud specialization designation, which means we went through an extensive process to be uniquely qualified to help you with your cloud needs, which is including, of course, migrations. So we've worked with clients, you really know, across all verticals. So you can think healthcare, finance, high tech, all the way to the public sector and really everything in between there. So we've kind of seen everything, and we've worked with all different types of data and all different types of customizations within people's environments. And then we also provide, a very broad range of services as well, right? So implementing the products, as well as, of course, migrating the products to the cloud environment. But we don't just leave you out to dry. We also have services that come after those two services, like managed services on the back end, where you get a block of hours that you can really consume, at your own pace for the things that you want. And you can just create a backlog for us to work through, as well as things like agile services and training around the products, right? So we really want, not just to implement and migrate you into the cloud, but we want to prepare customers and enable them to thrive once they get into their new environment within the cloud. So really everything within the environment, all of the services across the Atlassian suite that you could think of, ISOs can definitely help with. But I think you had it right, Isaac. There is a lot that goes into those migrations that people don't initially see. Those rehearsals, include custom app scripting rehearsals, proprietary tool rehearsals. But you're right, it also includes testing. We've got our own internal testing phase that we go into before handing it off to a client to do that user acceptance testing. And then we do a third round of testing right before that cutover so that they can validate their data, within that environment before we go live with them. So there's a lot that goes into those migrations, all the way from the discovery session at the beginning to that post-launch support that we offer after that cutover period.
Nick, I love it when you can reduce my headaches when I'm a CIO and you're telling me you've got the testing covered. And, something you said, around helping organizations post-migration reminds me of a webinar we did at the end of last year with the Michigan State Credit Union, talked about here was an admin who loves Jira Service Manager, wants to put standards in place, and she's using ISO's technology to help solve some of the hairiest problems they're having in terms of consolidating environments and end user training and things like that. So really good stuff. We do have a couple more questions here that have come in. Please do put them into the chat window, but let me summarize some of the key feedback here, lessons first. First is become knowledgeable. When you're facing a migration, even if you're working with a partner, become knowledgeable what your options are, what are some of the things you have to consider. That's the URL we shared earlier, Atlassian.com/migration. Quantify the operational benefits. I mentioned the Forrester report. It has a number of calculations in there for you to go figure out what the overall costs are and some of the benefits are in running in the cloud. So go to that URL, Atlassian.com/whitepapers and so forth, and you'll get to that URL where you can download the Forrester report. Accelerate the productivity benefits. Again, in IT, in application development, and digital transformation, and service management, this is the backbone of how well we're servicing the organization, how well we're doing innovation. And we're trying to get at some of these benefits like governance, self-service programs, Atlassian Access, and really game changers like advanced roadmaps. We want to be able to give those to our end users a lot faster. So very clear benefits in trying to migrate this year or going into early next year rather than waiting. Minimize your headaches by finding a partner. A lot of data considerations, app considerations, end user considerations. But most important to me is I don't want to lift and shift. I want to get to a better environment, and I want to get some help around testing so I don't have to go try to do a migration and get into a headache. And then Anderson's last point about reducing migration costs, right? Being able to do it in 3 to 6 months instead of 6 to 12 months. That's music to my ears. I can get to the benefits faster, and I don't have to spend a lot of money doing this. Let's talk about where you can get some more information around ISOs. The true cost of migrating to the Atlassian Cloud is a white paper. It's written by my friend Nick Nader over here. You can get that at isostech.com/cloud-migration. And if you have questions about and want to talk to experts about your migration, please visit isostech.com/contact-isos. So like I said, we do have some questions over here. And if you haven't asked yours yet, please put them in the box. There's a question here. We already have a cloud instance. We are using JSM and Confluence. Okay. Now we want to migrate our on-prem Jira software server to the cloud instance. How will that differ from migrating to a new clean instance? Any special things to consider? So, are we migrating or are we building a new clean instance? What are your thoughts around that, Nick?
Yeah, so it sounds like the customer is kind of talking about the difference between a lift and shift migration versus a merge migration. And there's definitely some complexity differences to those. When you already have, existing data and functionality and customizations within a cloud environment, and you want to pool a server environment and merge it with that existing cloud environment, that does create more complexity during the migration process, right? You have user merging that you need to remediate. You have workflow remediations that need to happen. And we have to pull the data from the cloud environments down into an intermediary server and mix it with your server data and then push it back up into your cloud environment. So it is something that adds a little bit of time to the migration, typically a few weeks at most, depending on the complexities of the environments. But it's still doable, right? It just makes it a little riskier and a little bit more complex. And, merge migrations are one of the ones that, customers typically fail on their own because they don't realize that it's much more difficult when you have already existing data within the cloud. So that's something that, a partner like ISOS, we help with quite often.
Great. There's a question here I think that's really important to answer around. It's a clarification for you, Anderson. He says, did I hear you correctly that without a partner to do the migration, it could take 6 to 12 months? I'm not exactly sure that's what you were saying. I think you're looking at some averages there, but can you clarify that for our listener around migration with a partner versus migration without a partner?
Yeah, it's not a strict timeline. It's just a gut feel check for me and what I've seen in the different timelines. Anytime I see a customer do it themselves, their timeline they usually have a timeline that they think they can accomplish, but it always ends up extending out further. When they work with a partner, that timeline usually stays pretty true to the partner, to the estimation the partner has given them in that initial assessment phase. When that initial assessment phase is done, the partner can say, here's what we're thinking. Just like Nick said, he can evaluate the complexity and he can tell you, oh, actually, this merge or this consolidation is going to add a couple of weeks because they have that experience. So what I'm trying to say is, if you want predictability out of your timeline, and if you want a shorter timeline and you're constrained on time, I strongly encourage considering a partner.
Right. And Anderson, you mentioned assessment a couple of times. Nick, how long does an assessment take? I mean, is this, quick and easy? What's going on in your assessments that provide this level of predictability around the migration?
Yeah, it's something that, depending on the volume, takes somewhere between 4 to 8 weeks for that assessment. For our larger customers, we like to do an extended assessment, and that's typically because of customizations on their environment, right? So complex workflow scripting that they have, we would want to dig into the usage of that and make sure that we can create those scripts within the cloud, or move them with their vendor migration path if you're using a third-party add-on like JMWE or JSU Automation Suite or Script Runner. So yeah, it really depends on the client and the environment, but sometimes we'll also kind of package them together, right? And we'll do that assessment as an extended discovery at the beginning of those migrations. I would say, though, that the biggest benefit of that assessment is by separating them out and doing the assessment first. You get this one fixed cost price for the assessment. You can take that assessment anywhere you want and shop around, but it also makes the estimate of the actual migration much more accurate and much more predictable, like Anderson was saying, right? Because we understand the usage of your third-party applications. We understand the complexities and the customizations within your environment. And now we know much more accurately it's going to take between this many weeks and this many weeks, rather than, hey, we generally think based off of your size and your system information pages that it's going to be 21 weeks or something like that. So much more accurate, much more predictable, and gives you a greater idea of what that actual cost and that actual risk is going to be in the long run.
Okay, so I'm hearing I should get some help from you on the assessment. That's going to provide a huge de-risking right up front. And then I have options about how I actually want to do the migration after that. Is that a good way to understand there?
Precisely, yeah.
There's a question here that I don't want to leave out. It's a long one. Our current company recently acquired another company, and while we have Confluence and Jira on-prem, they have SaaS, but with a user count only about 100 to 300. We are looking to get at least 2,000 to 3,000 users for both apps and are looking for migration recommendations. Would you propose to purchase a brand new instance and migrate both companies, or upgrade the user count on the SaaS instance and migrate our on-prem instance into the SaaS instance or other company? Are there any cost savings in these approaches?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think that we will typically prescribe the latter, right? Is leveraging the existing cloud environment. And something that Atlassian did recently was allow cloud instances to change their domain name, their URL. So even if you're acquiring a smaller company that has a separate domain name than you within the cloud, but you want to use that as your destination cloud environment for a merge migration, we can still leverage that cloud instance. That way you don't have to, create a new license model. You don't have to purchase a new cloud domain name and claim that through Atlassian Access or anything like that. We can pool that small amount of data within the existing acquired cloud environment, mix it with all of your server environment data, and then use that as our destination environment and just change the domain name. And that'll cut down on costs, because instead of pooling that existing cloud environment down and then pushing that and the server into a new cloud environment, we're still leveraging that existing cloud environment. So it's not quite as many moves in the long run as leveraging the existing one. So one destination, two environments. It's just less components to have to deal with.
Super.
I can add to that real quick. And another option is that I often see with customers with the M&A strategy, a constant M&A strategy, is that federated approach. Nick said federation can be done in data center, but it's a lot harder in cloud. we're building into the product to make it easier for you to manage a federated approach. If you have multiple companies, multiple mergers or acquisitions, they can still live in their independent site, but that doesn't mean you're creating silos. We have cross-site search, so you can search content across all of your sites as long as you're a user in those sites. We also have cloud-to-cloud migration tooling. So now the ability to move data from one cloud side to another is a lot less painful, and you can accomplish that a lot easier once you're in the cloud environment. So there's a couple of options for you to consider. Which one will be best will be kind of up to your use case and how you hope your end state to be.
Great. We have still a number of questions here. Keep them coming. There's a question here about cost estimates for the assessment if we partner with ISOs. I think that's something that that's something that they can follow up with you on. Please let us know in the chat if you'd like to follow up directly. So there are people monitoring the chat around this, and this is something that they can follow up with you on. There's a question here about, is current maintenance license for Jira Server required in order to work with a partner on migration?
Yeah, Anderson, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this one, but I think I'm understanding the question here. Are you talking about kind of the support from Atlassian that comes with your license model on-prem? I would assume you are. And if you are, that is definitely not required, to work with a partner with a migration, right? It's something that we can still work through Atlassian for. We always open up a migration ticket with Atlassian when we're doing a migration for a customer. And that's not something that relies on your subscription to their support, to enable. So definitely don't need that from my understanding. And you can correct me if I'm wrong there, Anderson.
Yeah, if you're working with a partner, you don't need active maintenance because you're working through that partner. If you decide to work through Atlassian directly, you may be asked to update your license subscription for maintenance. And so if you're working with a partner, again, not needed. If you're working directly through Atlassian, yes, you will need it.
Okay. Thank you for that straightforward answer. There's a question here. We use Atlassian products and we need to migrate, but our current use is not supporting our business processes and workflows. I don't see how a migration will help us leverage the benefits of Jira and Confluence. Will an ISOS migration help with the business analysis, or is this just a separate task? And is it possible that once we get the business model process more aligned, we should just start again rather than even trying to map and migrate? That seems like we should give you some help here. Nick, what's your first thought around that?
Yeah, so there's a short answer and a long answer to this. The short answer is the migration, isn't the only thing that ISOs can help you with, right? We can definitely help you with the business analysis and the restructuring of your environment to support your business objectives and goals. It's something that we also pair with migrations quite often, right? Because you're moving to the cloud. It's essentially an opportunity, like we were saying before, to restructure, consolidate, or change your processes within the tools. So oftentimes what we'll do is we'll implement an environment within the cloud and then migrate all of your data into that implementation that we've created within the cloud environment, right? So, implement your new process, which starts with a discovery. So we dig into your business goals and objectives. We decide what that business model within Jira and Confluence looks like best for your teams. We interview your teams, we gather all your requirements, we provide best practices and recommendations, and then we implement that all out within the cloud. And then the migration piece is about pooling your data and putting it into that place that we've created for it within the cloud environment. And to answer your last question real quick, it all depends on whether you want that, existing and historical data within your server products to end up within the cloud. Some client, and that's a client decision, right? Some clients want to have that historical data for reporting purposes. Some say, hey, we can start fresh. We'll just go with all their in-flight data only, or we just won't move any data at all, and we'll just go with a brand new implementation and start fresh within the cloud. So that's something that we could definitely provide, insights into and enable that decision for your stakeholders.
Thanks for that, Nick. I've seen this before too. I mean, it's an environment gets set up by one person, gets handoff to another person, gets overly complicated, and all of a sudden the business process doesn't meet what the configuration was doing, and lots of ways to get that reconfigured, reassessed before you do a migration. So this is clearly an example of lifting and shifting something broken isn't going to work in another environment, but using the opportunity to understand what is the desired business process, I think can go a long way in solving both the problem and actually having great tooling behind it. I'm going to take one more question here. This one looks like it's going to be useful to everyone. What are some of the potential pre-assessment steps that admins can undertake that can ultimately help reduce migration complexity and cost? Nick, so what can an admin do to just like get started? That's what it sounds like here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a great segue into what I linked just above within the chat, because the blog that I wrote, earlier in the last fall, actually talks about prepping for your Atlassian ground to cloud. So that the link is already in chat. I definitely recommend reading that. But to answer your question directly, there are a handful of things that you can dig into to, one, understand your environment, but two, also reduce some of that kind of pre-work and that cleanup that goes into some of our migrations. So you can reduce cost and you can reduce complexity by either consolidating custom fields, consolidating and archiving projects and workflows, and really any configuration item that your teams don't use, right? So during an assessment, we can walk around your organization or virtually walk around your organization now and talk to all your various teams and understand their usage of their projects and their third-party apps and applications. But if you want to save that time as an admin, you can do that yourself. Talk to the teams, understand some of those apps that were installed, willy-nilly by an old admin that aren't being actually utilized and aren't business critical, like we were talking about before, and say, hey, we don't need these applications, right? So, handing a partner a list of applications that are actually business critical and prioritizing that list of applications, and then consolidating and archiving a lot of those configuration items and projects that aren't highly leveraged or used. And then also making a couple of those decisions, pre-assessment, if you have, if you're enabled to make those decisions, right? Like, hey, do I want all of my historical data, or do we just want in-flight stuff? Do we need to consolidate our environments, or do we want to go with a federated approach like our customer story did previously? So any of those decisions that you can make early before the assessment, any of that cleanup that you can do prior to the assessment, all will help cut down on costs and reduce risk when you go into that migration and that assessment for your migration.
Nick, thanks for that answer. Again, that URL is in the chat. I'm going to ask the ISOS technology team to follow up and include that URL in their thank you email to you. So to make sure you can see that about prepping for your Atlassian ground to cloud migration. So thanks for that, Nick. Nick, thanks for joining us today. Anderson, thanks for joining us. Thank you for all of you for joining us today around cloud migrations. We can help you accelerate the benefits in getting to the cloud. And please follow up with by reading the white paper and reach out to ISOS Technology for that assessment around your cloud migration. Again, I'm Isaac Sokolik. I'm the president of Star CIO. Thank you for joining us today and look forward to seeing you at an upcoming webinar. Have a great day.